This is Roots, where movement continues even after you think it has paused. At the end of that period, I found myself once again at a threshold. No clear direction, no certainty, only movement continuing forward without explanation. Then a colleague gave me a number. Call this. It seemed ordinary at the time. Just a contact. Just a possibility. Just another step in a sequence of unknown outcomes. But it was not. A friend had invited me to Pretoria earlier to assist with administrative work on a project. I went, and after a week, I was offered a job. It was my first time truly leaving home for work. Not a visit, not a training, but a relocation. Before I left, I had to come back to Cape Town, to resign, to pack up my life, to close down an apartment I had only just begun to understand as mine, all within a week. I had been fortunate before. Work had always appeared without long gaps between it. But this time it felt different. This time there was no immediate bridge, only movement, and then departure. I remember the first night in Pretoria. I arrived expecting transition. Instead, I arrived into emptiness. The family I was meant to stay with had moved. The house was empty, unfurnished, quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar in a new city. For a moment, I stood inside that space and realized I was alone in a city I did not know yet. The next morning, I began navigating new streets, new routes, new routines forming without instruction. Eventually, I found my way to the office, and from there, slowly, I began to construct something resembling stability. I found a flat within walking distance of work, small steps that rebuilt orientation. Work, home, walking routes in between. And life settled, not all at once, but gradually. I stayed in Pretoria for almost 4 years, long enough for the city to stop feeling temporary, long enough for routines to form where uncertainty had been. Work expanded beyond the office. I travelled to smaller towns and distant places. Kimberley, Upington, a village outside Mthatha. Places that stretch geography and understanding at the same time. I began to see how different life could feel depending on where you stood. How cities, towns, and villages each carried their own pulse, their own rhythm, their own silence. At one point, I imagined living in a village permanently. But a colleague told me something I did not fully understand then. Village life is not for everyone. It wasn't a warning, just an observation. Work days grew longer. Sometimes I stayed late at the office to complete assignments, not out of pressure alone, but because the work felt like part of something larger than me. I began to understand impact in a different way, not abstract, not distance, but connected through people I met in field work, reports, and travel. And slowly my priorities began to shift, without announcement, without decision. They shifted around joy. What I had once loosely held became anchored. Protection replaced movement as instinct. I was not alone, even in distance, even in transition. There was always threads back home. Family, friends, familiar voices. And I would return to Cape Town often. Sometimes to Rustenburg, sometimes to Bloemfontein. Long roads that became familiar in their repetition. And somewhere in those journeys, I began to understand something quietly. That life does not always move forward in a straight line. Sometimes it loops. Sometimes it returns. Sometimes it pauses without stopping. But Pretoria remained, and I remained in it, learning it slowly, street by street, routine by routine, day by day. This is Roots, and I was now inside a new one.